Have you ever found yourself in a new role, maybe taking on a huge project, and you get that quiet, nagging voice in your head, the one that says you're a fraud and you're about to be found out? Well, it's an incredibly common feeling, especially for ambitious people. In this explainer, we're going to decode that feeling, not as some personal flaw, but as a predictable signal that points to a very specific and actually productive phase of your development.
And look, this isn't just you. That quote, that's from Albert Einstein. It really highlights that this feeling has nothing to do with your actual competence. It's a pattern we see even at the highest levels of human achievement. And that suggests that maybe the feeling itself isn't the problem. Maybe it's how we're interpreting it that's all wrong.
So, that begs the real question, right? If this feeling isn't about competence, then what is it about? Why does this sense of being an imposter show up so reliably whenever people are really pushing their boundaries? This is where we need to stop just feeling it and start analyzing it.
And here it is. This is the core idea of this entire analysis. That feeling of being an imposter isn't a bug in your psychology. It's a feature. Think of it like a tracking system, one that's telling you that you've just stepped into a new zone of development. It's not some final verdict on your ability, but rather a leading indicator of your future growth.
Okay, so let's start by trying to find the signal inside all that static. For years, this feeling has been framed as a problem to be fixed, some kind of psychological flaw you have to overcome. But what if we've been reading the signal completely backward this whole time? Let's look at the observable pattern, not just the popular story.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. On the left, you've got the common belief. That feeling is proof that you're inadequate. But on the right, you see the actual pattern we observe in high performers over time. The feeling is simply evidence that you're operating right at the edge of your current skills. And these two interpretations, they lead to completely different behaviors.
So if it's a signal, what is it actually telling us? This is where we get into the mental mechanics of it all. See, real growth isn't this smooth, confident climb. It's usually pretty awkward and, uncomfortable. Let's break down the two main signals that get bundled together into what we call imposter syndrome.
The first signal is all about skill expansion. That imposter feeling tends to show up when the demands of your environment start to outpace your established identity. You get a bigger title, more responsibility, a much harder problem to solve, and your current skill set is being actively stretched to its limit to meet these new demands.
And this is exactly how it works. Your world has just gotten bigger, but your internal self-concept hasn't caught up yet. It's so easy to mistake the feeling of unfamiliarity with incompetence. You're not incompetent. You're just new to this level. You've basically outgrown your old definition of you, and that feeling of being a fraud is just the cognitive dissonance that comes with the upgrade.
Now, the second signal is even more counterintuitive. That anxiety, that feeling of being totally exposed, it actually triggers a heightened state of learning. It's a biological response. Your brain perceives a threat, the threat of failure or judgment, and it kicks itself into a higher gear.
Let's just walk through this cycle. First, you're exposed to that new challenge, and it creates a mild threat response. That, in turn, sharpens your attention and focus. You become locked in on the task. Third, this intense focus drives effort. It's what makes you over-prepare, what makes you iterate faster. And finally, all that sustained effort leads to adaptation. You actually close the skill gap and build real competence. So that initial discomfort, it's literally the fuel for the entire process. And this brings us to the deepest mechanism at play here. It explains that really frustrating delay between knowing how to do something and actually feeling like you know how to do it. There's a name for this phenomenon: identity lag.
Identity lag. It's that gap in time between when your behavior changes and when your belief system finally catches up. You could be performing the job of a leader for months before you actually feel like a leader. And this lag, it's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's just a normal, predictable part of how we adapt.
So, here's the crucial insight. Most of us have the sequence of growth completely backward. We think we need to feel confident before we can act. But the observable reality is the exact opposite. We have to act first, often without any confidence at all. We have to do the work, change the behavior, and get the results. The feeling of confidence, that solid identity, that's the reward that comes after the work is done, not the prerequisite for starting. And understanding this sequence is absolutely critical, because getting it wrong, misinterpreting these signals, carries a really high cost. How you choose to respond when you're at this fork in the road is what determines whether you plateau or you continue on a steep growth curve.
Just look at these two paths. If you read anxiety as a signal to stop, to pull back to what's comfortable, you stall. You end up avoiding the very challenges that would have made you grow.
But if you correctly read that exact same anxiety as a sign that you're in the learning zone, if you see discomfort as the necessary price of admission for a new skill, you lean in, you grow. It's the same feeling. A different interpretation creates a completely different outcome.
So, you see, this isn't about little tactics like faking it till you make it. This is about a fundamental shift in how you perceive the world. It's about learning to see that entire experience of stepping up, not as some painful trial to be endured, but as a predictable and honestly, a productive biological process.
People who grow consistently share this perception. For them, being in an unfamiliar situation isn't a stop sign, it's the starting line. Anxiety isn't a weakness to be hidden, it's fuel for focus. That urge to over-prepare isn't a sign of insecurity, it's a smart strategy to accelerate learning. And that feeling of being fake, it's just a temporary, transitional state you have to pass through on your way to real mastery.
All right, so now let's turn this framework back on you. We're not going to end with simple advice. Instead, we're going to end with 3 questions to help you apply these ideas directly to your own experience.
First question. The next time you feel like an imposter, instead of just letting the anxiety wash over you, use it like a diagnostic tool. Ask yourself, what specific new skill is this feeling attached to? What new responsibility is creating this friction? That feeling is a spotlight, and it's showing you exactly where your growth edge is right now.
Second, you need to recognize that the energy behind anxiety can be redirected. The natural impulse might be to retreat, to avoid the situation. But how can you consciously decide to rechannel that nervous energy into preparation, into asking one more question, doing one more practice run, or just studying the problem a little bit deeper?
And finally, this is the most important shift of all. What would happen if you just stopped trying to eliminate this feeling? What if instead you started to welcome it as proof that you're not playing it safe, proof that you are on the right track? What if feeling like an imposter isn't a problem to be solved, but is simply the price of admission for a life of meaningful growth?